We all know the ToneX Pedal is an incredible live musical tool that we can use to play with a band in rehearsal, go straight to front of house. But one question that I get a lot are from players who just play at home, who aren't in bands, who don't do rehearsals. They like to sit in their basement or home studio or bedroom and simply play at home without having to pull up, let's say, the ToneX software. So I get lots of questions asking what the best way to do that is. And today we're going to cover some of the possibilities of how we can use ToneX in a home studio setup. So without further ado, let's get right to it. So first up is the obvious but often overlooked setup, and that is to simply plug our ToneX pedal into an existing audio interface that's already integrated into our studio setup. For my particular setup here today, I am using my Universal Apollo X4, and I simply have my white anniversary ToneX pedal that is here on my desktop, taking the left and right main outputs and plugging those into line inputs on my audio interface. And yes, I am going into line inputs. The outputs on the ToneX pedal are low impedance and will work beautifully with your line inputs on your audio interface. So this setup lets you treat the pedal as a real amp replacement. You dial in a great tone, plug it into your interface, and hit record. Now I can already hear people in the comment section saying, why not just plug into your interface and then use ToneX plugin? And that's a totally fair point. But here's the thing, some players just like to work with a real hardware pedal. There's something about turning a knob or locking in a tone and printing it to tape that feels maybe more immediate and more intentional, more like a real amp. We also have our ToneX editor now that we could just go in and use this to edit as well without having to fiddle with the software. Now, one really important point here is that to use it in this way, we are going to have to come up to our global settings, head over to the General tab and make sure that the operation mode is in live. So I have loaded up on here one of the tone models from my incredible Jack Victor V30 Ultimate collection. And this is based off of my Victory amplification, the Jack V30 Mark II amp. And these tones are just killer. The links will be below to those if you're so inclined. So like I said, by going up to our global setup, heading to the General tab and setting this to live mode, it's going to allow us to just hear the tone coming out like we would be using our ToneX pedal like an amp or into front of house or into an FR speaker. In this particular case, I'm using my studio monitors. Now, if I was set to interface mode, which we're going to talk about in a moment, we get no sound. So now the audio outputs are being sent out of the USB outputs here so that we can use this as an audio interface, which we'll talk about in a moment. Back to live mode. We get a great, wonderful way of working like that. Now, if we were going to go over to our DAW to record, we would simply have our setup all ready to go, as it always is with our audio interface set to feed into our DAW, and we would select the proper line inputs on our DAW to be able to record a track with it, or maybe we just want to jam along like I'm doing right now. Now, the other way that we could utilize ToneX Pedal in a home studio setup would be in interface mode. So again, the first thing we're going to have to do is head over to our global settings. And again, we can either do this on the pedal, but today I'm using ToneX Editor. We go up to our global setup. We head over to the General tab here, and I'm going to go to interface mode. Now you'll notice, as I showed a moment ago, that when we do that, we no longer have any tones coming out of our ToneX pedal because it is now going to be used as an audio interface. And there's a couple things we can do when set up as an audio interface. So I can come over to my DAW. For this particular video, I'm utilizing Cubase 13 Pro, and I can head up to my Studio tab here off screen and Studio Setup, and I'm going to want to make sure that ToneX pedal is selected as my audio interface. Now, when I do that, I can also go to the control panel here and make sure that, and I'm going to want to make sure that my buffer size is set as low as possible. I'm able on my system to get this down to 32 setting on the buffer size. Do just that. I'm going to have fairly nice low latency here when I play. So now that it's set up as an audio interface, we got to watch something else. We'll come back over to global setup here. And once we get to this General tab, you'll notice another setting we have here, which is either stereo or dual. So in stereo mode, basically what's happening is I'm going to add a track here. and I'm going to make it a stereo track, and I'm going to say that I want that to connect to the stereo in bus. I'm going to add that track. I'm going to come into Cubase here and make sure that the stereo in is set to ToneX left and right. So just as it sounds, when I arm and monitor enable this track, I will be able to hear my guitar again. If I hit record, it will record onto this track. But what is going to record? Well, basically what's going to record is the stereo left, right, out of our ToneX pedal onto this track. And I can do just that. I can come back over here, make sure my input monitoring is disabled. And I can listen to what I recorded. So that would be a very cool way to use it in the studio setup as such. But there is another method. I'm just going to remove this track. I'm going to come back over to ToneX Editor. I am going to head back to Global Setup, and I'm going to choose Dual Mode. And what Dual Mode is going to allow us to use ToneX in a different way as an audio interface. Now, in this case, we're still going to have our ToneX left and right outputs. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to add 2 tracks here. I'm going to add a mono track, and I'm going to make one of them just being fed with ToneX left, or the mono 1 input. And we're going to call that guitar 1. And then I'm going to add another track, but I'm going to select ToneX right mono as guitar DI. Now you might ask me why I'm doing that. I can close my dialog box. I'm going to mute this channel. I'm going to come up here now to my guitar 1, and you're going to hear that we are now in mono. So if we didn't need to record in stereo and we just wanted to capture our guitar in mono, we can use this setting, and what that's going to allow us to do is to utilize the other output, the right side, to capture just our guitar DI. So that as I'm recording now, let's go back here and we'll go back to original setup. Let's say I was recording a riff. We have that recorded now. When I come back over here, I have my main guitar track recorded, but I also have captured a DI track of it as well over here on this track right there. So I'm going to have my processed guitar tone on track 1, and I'm going to have my DI dry guitar, which we can reamp later. We could throw an instance of ToneX software on that if we so desired, or we could reamp it. So it's a very useful thing to have, and I always print a raw DI of my guitar just in case I need to change something later. Now, one thing we do have to be very careful about here, and you'll notice here on my input meters, I have ToneX left, which is going to be my processed guitar tone. And again, I'll just come up here, input enable that. So that's this right here. Now this meter is showing me my guitar DI. Now, one thing we have to be very careful of when using dual mode, when we go to global setup, if I have my input trim, you'll notice mine is at -3 where I always keep it so that I have more headroom as you're about to see here. If we have this up at the +8.5 that so many people seem to like to work at, and that is the default setting, it's going to basically render the dual mode useless, because watch what happens here now on our mono track. We're immediately into clipping. I'm using my PRS Custom 22. It's not a ridiculously high output guitar, but even when I hit lightly, I'm just clipping, and that basically is going to destroy the ability to use this, because as soon as I record anything, you'll see up here that my audio is basically completely clipped and distorted and useless, simply because I set this input trim way too high. Now, keep in mind also, we already know that the global input trim on the ToneX pedal comes after the A to D converter, so we're really doing nothing here. We're not making signal to noise ratio better. It's doing nothing other than basically destroying one feature of the pedal, and this is one of the reasons I've always advocated for keeping this down right around -3, which is going to put it in the ballpark of a lot of really modern audio interfaces set at their minimum level, which is plenty of headroom for most guitars and also maximizes signal to noise ratio to any meaningful amount. So there you have it, a couple really cool ways to utilize ToneX Pedal at home. This is answering a question that I get so often. Should I plug it into my existing audio interface? Should I use it as a standalone audio interface? And it's really going to depend on what your workflow is, what your setup is, and what your end goals are. It can work really well in all of those situations, but we just have to be careful of a few things such as this input trim setting for our dual mode and whatnot. So I hope that that was helpful. The links are below to any of the tones you heard in today's video. If you're so inclined and want to grab a copy of them, I really love these tones. It's an incredible amp. And I'm going to leave you today with the full-blown demo video showcasing these tones in the mix so you can hear what they sound like completely unprocessed. Whenever I do these in the mix videos, I always just take the tones straight on. Don't EQ them, don't add anything other than what's in ToneX. There could be a bit of compression or reverb, but that's all going to be coming from ToneX itself. So I hope you enjoy those tones. Again, the links are below if you're so inclined and want to grab a copy of them. Thank you guys so much for sharing your time with me. Please like the video, share it with anybody you think would get some use or enjoyment out of watching it. And also please subscribe to the channel. Hit the little bell notification to get notified when I put new content. I'll be back really soon with some more. Enjoy the music on the way out, and we'll talk very soon.